All right, thanks for coming back. You know, one of the things that this show is about, it's not just about having a conversation. Uh, I'm an advocate. I'm an activist. I don't really consider myself a radio host. Maybe someday I can feel comfortable being called that. But I'm an activist first. I've been involved in issues for a long time. And one of the things that happened when this floor tax thing came out, and when I saw those letters that started coming out last Christmas, where people were being assessed these, in some cases, ungodly amounts of money for a product that is long since been sold. In fact, most of the assessments that I saw, um, and just to recap, the floor tax was essentially a tax that a wholesaler or a manufacturer would be assessed for product that they paid for and paid the excise tax on before the tax increase, so they could be taxed the difference, the new tax increase after the fact. There was never a belief that this thing would apply to us on native territory. One of the things that, to keep in mind is that the federal excise tax has been raised at least two other times that I recall since we've been in this business. This was the third increase that I'm aware of. It was the largest, but it's never been assessed before. It has never been pushed like this before. So when this thing came out, this was something that I took really offense to, because it was a brand new tax. It was something new. We were always fighting the old battles, but this was a brand new one that was coming to us, and it was essentially a one-shot deal. They were going to try to assess these taxes, and frankly, what they did was they just made some assumptions. They sent people tax bills and say, we've determined, they never said how they determined, that you owe this much money. And then they said, so pay this. And if you don't want to pay this, then you bring every one of your documents. So in other words, come here and lift your skirt so we can evaluate your business. And of course, none of us want to do that. I mean, that is as much of an affront to our sovereignty as the tax itself. So this was the issue that Ross and I initially started making some noise about. And again, I certainly wasn't trying to step on the Seneca Nation's toes. The issue was that this tax was affecting not just Seneca people, but it was affecting everybody throughout the Haudenosaunee and I assume other places. So when we brought the question to two of the legislators, we said, was it your plan? We talked to Kirsten Gillibrand, we talked to Brian Hickens' office, and we said, was this your plan to do this thing? And they said, no, we had no idea that it was going to be interpreted this way. So we initiated this effort, and I know Sue Abrahms, you and Todd both. I remember sitting with you guys at Seneca Free Trade Association meetings. You guys were sitting counselors, and I know Tracy Brown and a few others were at some of these meetings. And the conversation was, look, we're trying to initiate at least to have that conversation with Jody Gillette or Kim Teehee, who is the senior White House advisor to the President of the United States, because we felt like talking to TTV officials or talking to the IRS was, you weren't going to get it. They weren't going to cut any slack here. You need to talk to people that could say, look, this thing is being interpreted wrongly, and that was the initiative. You guys supported what Ross and I had initiated, and then the rug got pulled out. So first, I want to at least address, what was the sentiment. And I know, Todd, although you're co-vice chair for the Seneca Party, you're still a sitting councilor. What was your thoughts on the floor tax in general?
Well, Rob Porter put out a letter to the business people, and it was pretty. I liked the letter. It was actually going to address the problem about how they were going to enforce that on the nation and address that issue. And but the next letter that we seen was to the TTB asking for and that's actually submitting to their jurisdiction. And I didn't agree with that, and that's why we still wanted to hold that meeting with Kim Teehee or some White House representative as our our federal treaty partner to strengthen our idea that floor tax was had no place on our territory.
Well, the whole idea is that these issues should not ever be resolved in court. Us throwing ourselves at the mercy of their judges to address these issues is inappropriate. There should be diplomacy used, and that diplomacy, is something that I think, that I felt comfortable approaching this thing with Ross as people who have been involved in Native issues back to the League of First Nations and that kind of thing. And it wasn't to do it in the absence of Seneca leadership or any other Native territory. In fact, I think you guys had genuinely supported what we were trying to do, and we were trying to include the Seneca Nation. I even reached out to Brian Gonzalez, who was a sitting councilor, and he said he didn't feel like he ever wanted to work with somebody who was working against the Seneca people. And I don't know what that was even supposed to mean. But so he had taken a strong position against trying to meet with the White House staffers, and I felt like this was, as I see here today, I still think that Barack Obama could make this thing go away with a phone call, and that's what should be approached.
Issue. It's a native issue across the country. A lot of the Seneca, or not even Seneca, but native wholesalers, they all had to pay that tax, and it's.
Well, and let's be clear, the amount of tobacco products that are being sold on our territories, the federal government's getting lots of money because that excise tax increase is being paid, just not on that one day. And when they tried to assess this thing, Ross, and you know yourself, you think about the number of mail orders that existed, they assessed these things just based on information they wouldn't share. They said, we determined that you owe this amount.
Well, yeah,
and that was
the tough thing to kind of swallow, not the fact, as well as the fact is that they're saying that they had taxing authority. They're also saying that you have to prove to us, and where they pulled some of their numbers and their assumptions that, we're housing all these tobacco products when a lot of us were just buying day to day and we didn't have months.
Well, that's the way a mail order works. Mail order basically orders product. They get an order and then they order it for it to ship out that same day. So they're not warehousing products.
Yeah, who wants to be a warehouse at that point? There was a lot of mail orders that were in that position. But my other problem is the way that Mr. Porter tried to address this issue. He went to the tax department and he had his conversations there, and then he came back and basically said, look, there's nothing I can do for you guys. In fact, they told me I could get in trouble for, speaking up on your guys' behalf because this were individual issues, and it's like, you wanted to take him by the scruff of the neck and said, you signed on to be the president of the Seneca Nation.
He basically got scolded by taxing
well,
authorities.
That's the way he told everybody, and it's like, so you better put your big boy pants on and go and do it. In other words, if you're afraid of a taxing department and you're afraid to take a position for all of your people, what are you doing sitting there?
Well, and one of the things that the only thing I will say, Todd, about the first letter that came from Porter that I didn't agree with, if you recall in that letter, he said his biggest gripe to the federal government was, you're interfering with my right to govern. I mean, that was one of the lines in his, and I'm thinking, no, this was an affront to the Seneca people. This wasn't about Rob's, authority to govern his people. He actually took this tax as his toes being stepped on, and I thought that was inappropriate. Sue, I know you. I remember talking about this with you the first time this letter came out.
There was parts of that letter we didn't agree with. We didn't agree with this whole position really, and that's why we were.
But at least he stood up.
Yeah, but we stood apart from that. We had a different line, and it was kind of in line with Ross's and your view that that was that tax shouldn't ever been considered.
There's a whole lot of taxes that are yet to fight. I mean, obviously and the Seneca Nation still has some federal income tax issues because of the annuity thing. That's still an ongoing battle, that I assume. So this is kind of what you guys are going to be facing in this upcoming term.
Well, I want to, before you move on to the annuities, I want to really confirm with the listeners and the audience. Rob Porter does not support the private sector. It's very apparent in many of his statements that he's made privately in our closed-door office meetings and so forth. And when we proposed your idea, Ross, and of course yours, John, to actually go down to Washington, D.C. and look for people to help support us on that and help overturn the decision, Rob told us, all of us counselors sitting there, he says, we would all look like fools. Who would want to do that? And I thought that was absurd, actually. But needless to say, I think that this administration, the new Seneca Party that's coming up, we are going to address this issue. We're going to fight this issue. We've collected $57 million from the business sector of the Seneca Nation of Indians. We have $11 million left. We need to put some of that money toward a defense fund where it was initially promised that half of that fund would go toward legal defense for our people, and we should spend it the way it was promised and collected. But on the issue, you brought up a very important issue. The issue is annuity payments. I was interested in a CD, and I wanted to bring it this evening, but was pressed for time. On the CD, it was on February 25th, 2012, just a few months ago. Rob Porter, President of the Seneca Nation, made a State of the Nation address. In the last 2 minutes of his presentation, he made the statement that, he says, I think you might think this is a crazy idea, but I would like each and every Seneca to contribute $500 of their annuity checks to a new plan, a plan that is going to save the nation. So whatever plan he has in his head, certainly he wants the Seneca people to pay for it, and he wants to make determinations of, on how that money is spent that belongs to the Seneca
So he
people.
basically wants to spend
Their money.
individuals' money as well.
Yes.
All right. Well, we're gonna take a break here, but when I come back, one of the things I want to talk about is, and it fits in with this thing. It has to do with the amount of money that the Seneca Nation has spent on lobbyists, on lawyers, and on campaign contributions to the Republicans and the Democrats. And we're going to talk about that in in the next segment, because honestly, we need to step up as Native people as our best advocates. And I think that's one of the issues one of the things that Ross and I were trying to do is say, look, you don't need to spend $400 an hour on a lobbyist. We'll work cheap.
I know. I know that.
Well, yeah. What you mean we'll work cheap? No.
No.
No. So to me, the best thing that a lobbyist can do is open the door so some of us can walk through. And I'm not, suggesting that it has to be Ross and I. I think there are very capable people, not only on council, but look in your community. There are people who could be great spokespersons who they do not necessarily have to be registered lobbyists to have these conversations. The people that we need to address, we need to show our capability. We need to revisit. There's a reason you guys are called Senecas, and I don't know if you know this. I mean, the reason you're called Seneca is because the early Americans or Europeans thought the statesmanship that certain people in of this nation had was similar to Roman orators. That's the statesmanship was what people were known for. And if all you're going to do is hire some Ogilvy or whoever else down in Washington and pay ungodly amounts to these lobbyists and these lawyers, and I know there's a place for some of this, but I hope it's something that you guys reevaluate in this next term. But we'll talk about more about that in the next segment. We'll be right back. This is John Kane. All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. I do have a room full of folks from the Seneca Nation. I've got Ross John, Holly John, and Todd Gates. And I've got 3 candidates for Seneca Nation Council: Sue Abrahms, Cheryl Curry, and Subi Dockstader. Look, one of the things, that I wrote a post on my blog this past week and got a lot of attention over because I don't vote, and I don't advise necessarily or encourage Native people to vote in the non-Native elections. I think that's it's inappropriate. But and I think people who think that your one civic responsibility is to vote and that's it. That's not the case, and it certainly isn't the case in the Seneca Nation. I think part of your responsibility as a Seneca is to participate in the process that is your government. And the first thing that they should do is vote on Tuesday. Whatever, no matter who they want to vote for, they should participate, and they should be as much participation in the election. But more importantly than that, there has to be continued participation by the people. They've got to make sure they can reach out to the people. It's fine to offer transparency, but if nobody's going to look, then transparency is meaningless. So the whole idea, and so what I'm telling, although I don't advocate people voting in the non-Native elections, I absolutely do advocate that the Senecas need to participate in their electoral process as much as possible. And beyond that, don't think that that's it. Your responsibility, because everybody wants to talk about rights, but nobody wants to talk about responsibility. Your responsibility is to stay engaged with you guys who are running for council. As you become elected on the council, you need to stay. The Seneca people need to stay engaged, and of course, you guys as servants of the people, you need to stay engaged with the people. And because you can't let people just cast a vote and then walk away and think that they've done all their responsibility is. So that's one of the things that I think is important, is worth noting. Again, we were talking as we were going off the last segment. One of the things that has been in the paper recently was how much money the Seneca Nation has spent on campaign contributions, and this kind of went to my argument about why it's inappropriate. Because I've heard all people say, "Oh, well, the Native people need to get out the vote to support Barack Obama." For one thing, Barack Obama's going to carry New York State in a landslide. It's not even close. But with or without us. So let's be honest there. But the crazy part is when you look at and Seneca Nation's not the only one. Other nations are spending an ungodly amount of money on campaign contributions. And I know, Ross, you once brought this up in a Foreign Relations Committee meeting, from what I understand. You said, how do you evaluate whether these campaigns, these PR campaigns, or whether these campaign contributions have any value? So if you can't evaluate whether these things have any return, I mean, what's the cost-benefit analysis? And I don't know, Sue, Todd, as you guys have sat on council, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. And of course, I don't know what you guys think about going forward on this issue.
When Robert Porter asked me for my vote to support the contribution list that he presented to us through our lobbyists, I told him that I would support it the first time only, because I didn't see how he would measure how the Seneca Nation would benefit from it unless there were actual votes cast. I have not seen or heard of any votes cast on behalf of the Seneca Nation in any capacity.
So are you saying some of this money is going without it being run through a process, or?
Well, certainly the last $125,000 just recently that was announced in the paper that we learned of in the paper, not in council at all.
Oh, it's a good thing you guys read the papers.
Yeah.
So you find out what's going on in Seneca.
Yeah, really. Porter made a $100,000 contribution to the Republicans and $25,000 to the Democrats, I understand. I don't know where the return is for the Seneca Nation on that investment, and I think the nation needs to stop that and start spending money within our own territory, in our own boundaries, to help the needs of our people, because there's still many needs.
Well, and the part of that's crazy part is, even as the Buffalo News looked at this story, they said it didn't make any sense for the contributions, because the way he contributed wasn't going to affect the election anyway. So clearly he was trying to buy favor with certain individuals, but at the end of the day, I go back to things like Turo Wampum, and I know, Todd, you come from a bit of a longhouse background as well, and I always think it's inappropriate for us to meddle. It's one thing for us to have an opinion about who we hope gets into those offices, or one thing, and especially based on our ability to have diplomatic relations with them. But it's another thing to be throwing money into their campaigns.
Yeah, that's not we're not that simple, and they've been knocking our boat for a while. But I did agree to those initial payments, but I wanted to see some results, and I think the result that we wanted to see was that vote in the legislature that passed, allowing the expansion of gaming. And that
didn't work out too well.
That didn't work out very well at all. So that turned my whole view right there, and that was my gauge. And I don't support it anymore. We need to take care of ourselves. That money could be better used on territory, and that's my view.
Yeah, that's what bothers me. Porter used that money to go outside our territory when we have children in homes that have no running water. And with this new election, with this Barry Snyder coming at the helm here as president, I believe that he'll take care of our people. He's always taken care of our people and had an open door open door policy for people in need. And that's the wrong with Porter. He hasn't done that. You could make a phone call the president's office, and they'll say, well, you got to fill out paperwork. Yep. And I says, you mean to tell me I can't talk to my own president? They said, no, you have to fill out paperwork. Since when do you fill out paperwork to ask for help? What kind of president is that? So I'm very confident with this new election that Barry Snyder's going to go ahead and help our people, as well as us sitting here as elected officials.
Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but I get a chance to go on Susan Arbetter's show in Albany from time to time, and her show broadcasts right out of the Capitol in Albany. And one of those trips out there, I spoke with George Maziarz, who's a pretty good supporter of Native issues in general. Although I think he did support this expansion of gaming, by the way. But one of the things that I asked him about, I asked him about this with the state basically prohibiting their wholesalers from providing product to our territories anymore, with their initiatives to really kill our business. I wanted him to ask Thomas Maddox, who was the commissioner of the New York State Tax and Finance Department, what was the position of the state on native to native trade and on native brands? Because clearly there should have been a distinction. Now keep in mind, there's not a dollar's worth of lobbying being spent here. I go to a New York State senator, and I get him to write a letter. That letter's been widely distributed. He wrote this letter over a year ago, and he basically took a position. And I actually got Tim Kennedy to sign the letter as well. So this is a letter from Tim Kennedy and George Maziarz to the tax commissioner saying our position is, as state senators, that the state has no authority to interfere with native to native trade. There was not a dime worth of lobbying that was spent there. And he never got an answer back from Maddox. But I also went back to to Macy Ours. I said, hey, you never got an answer from Maddox. Why don't you write another letter? So he wrote another letter. I've provided these letters even to
Right.
some of the attorneys. And in fact, I spoke with Dennis Vaca, who has agreed to come on the show. And he's a former New York State Attorney General. And I said, look, this is what we've gotten out of Maziar's trying to push the buttons on Maddox. And he thought those two letters were valuable. And he was aware of the first one, but wasn't aware of the second one. He's representing some of the folks who had product seized because that's what part of the letter was addressed. So my point in saying this, and I'm not trying to say, geez, you guys owe me. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that this is the kind of effort that can happen by just doing it. And it doesn't require necessarily having to spend millions of dollars with lawyers and lobbyists. Some of this stuff has to do with diplomacy.
John, I mean, some of this is, it wasn't even just that a lot of the wholesalers and people that were continuing on with the business, they had copies of these statements. And they were giving them to agencies that were pulling them over and doing this and said, you guys better settle this issue within yourself because you have some very significant people in your legislature that don't believe that you have this authority. And so it put them back on their heels just to have that. And what you're saying is that, again, what we're trying to get the Seneca Nation to try to understand with its lobbying dollars is that, again, what's the return on investment? Like Todd is saying, every time we throw money into it, it doesn't help us one bit.
But there should be a way to have a metric to find out whether there's a return on it.
Right. But here's the other thing is that, and the other thing I try to remind people of is that, but you're never going to outspend the outside interest that's out there. When it came to gaming, it's like, do you think the Seneca Nation is going to outspend the gaming dollars that are going to be coming in? I said they're not.
And that's what I said.
So
That's
you
the
only
reason.
have your sovereignty and your legal position to be able to stand on this.
Exactly, and the thing is, so if you can't match dollar for the people who are working against us, and the same reason that why I think that our vote in the outside election, not only do I think it's inappropriate from a native standpoint, but we aren't going to sway much opinion in those elections. They don't come to us as people that are going to somehow sway an election. They know that we don't represent a solid voting bloc. I mean, the Seneca Nation itself is divided by 3 counties. So think about, not only do you have the Seneca population divided into 3 separate counties, I don't know how many districts that there actually is, but they get divided up in that way, and of course, there's no guarantee that every Seneca is going to vote the same way. So there isn't a solid voting bloc that goes one way or the other. Go ahead, Todd, you want to weigh in?
I just want to let the Seneca voters know that on election day there will be rides available, and at the Cattaraugus headquarters and Allegheny headquarters. The numbers for Cattaraugus 549-1383. Numbers for Allegheny 265-2005. And these vans are also handicap accessible, so the rides and the polls are open from 9 to 7. Get out there and vote in our election. That's what I stress for our voters if they want to affect the change that we are promising here today.
Do you have a Facebook group page for your party? What is it under?
Well, I don't know what the Facebook page is, but I do know that we have www.senecaparty.com.
Okay, so some of that information will be on there. But if you do look for Seneca Party, I thought that you guys did have a group page, but I don't know. If not, then maybe you can give me that information. And I'll post it on my group page as well. Look, we do gotta take a break, Sue. So we'll be right back after this. But it's the final segment. So gather your thoughts during this break, and let's hit it hard here, guys. All right, this is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. We'll be right back. All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Hey, one of the things I want to make clear is it seems like in the past where the voting takes place in the Seneca Nation, that has changed, and now they're being done at the administration building. So at the William Seneca building in Cattaraugus is where the voting will take place, and in Allegheny it'll be at the Seneca Allegheny administration building. So for those who are used to going to the fire hall or wherever else they've had to go in the past,
Sailor building and
or the Sailor building.
JoJo building.
Okay, yeah. So again, be aware that these that the voting, the polling stations are now going to be at the administration buildings, and I think it's really important that people know that. And again, Sue, you want to give those numbers again for people to call for rides or whatever?
For Cattaraugus, it'll be 549-1383. Allegheny headquarters is 265-2005, and they will have handicap vans available. Polls open at 9 till 7, and just get out there and vote row B.
And that's Tuesday. Okay, all right, Ross, you wanted to,
Well, I just wanted to say something, and I am one of the co-chairs, so I'm a little bit biased to the party situation here, but the reason why, I like the Seneca party, row B, is for the reason is, and I can look around this room, is that when people stop talking about the credentials of the people, and everybody's out there trying to vet themselves on their education and, what they've done in the past, it comes down to a simple thing for me, is that when I look around the room and I look at Suki, Cheryl, Sue, Todd, and the other people, Barry and Scott and everybody else that is part of the Seneca party, is that these people are volunteers in the community as well. These people are out there doing things at no cost to try to help out. They're out there trying to benefit their people, and they've showed that they're responsible that way. And it's not just for a paycheck, and it's not just for ego. And I think that's why it's important to vote. This election is that we seem to we fell in a trap of allowing people into office that had just credentials, but were never willing to give anything back of themselves to the Seneca people. Not monetary, they only wanted to take. They felt like the people were theirs to be governed, not a voice. And, these are people that mix it up in the community. They're known in the community. You can go to any events and you're gonna see these same faces there. You can't say that for a lot of the people on a lot of the other tickets that are out there.
well, and I think one of the things that, this isn't just a two-man race. Obviously, the Seneca party is running against the nephew Porter party. There is another candidate running for president. Actually, there's another, Cy Schindler and Aaron Pierce. These guys are running. I don't know if there's anybody else beyond that. But part of the things that concerns me is, people have to realize that the voting for Richard Nephew is really going to keep Porter, even if Porter doesn't win the treasurer spot. Richard seems to be beholding, and very much strongly beholding to Porter. And if Richard should persevere, you can bet he's going to have Porter sitting beside him one way or the other, either into an appointed position or something like that. So that's something that's got to be realized. But the other thing that concerns me about some of the other candidates, there's guys like Aaron Pierce who's spending an ungodly amount of money trying to become the president of the Seneca Nation, and nobody's addressed what's the end game. Why? He may be approaching $1 million that he's spending on this, which is unheard of in Seneca elections. I know signs cost money and that kind of stuff, but there's a lot of money being pumped in. So one of the primary candidates is spending an ungodly amount of money, personal money. He's not being supported by outside or nobody's making donations to him. He's spending his personal wealth to become the president of Seneca Nation. That's a bit disconcerting as far as I'm concerned.
Who's making all the money is the sign companies.
Well, and frankly, Aaron is somebody who was really trying to endear himself to Rob Porter.
Well,
so I
do have one issue, because I talked to I had an issue, and I let him know with one of his campaign handlers, is that you got to stop getting the people drunk every stinking weekend, because people are starting to get hurt. And now, and I want to say, people are going to get hurt, and that's on your head. And you got to be man enough, if you're going to be doing this, you got to take that responsibility.
Yeah, again, I'm not trying to sling mud at everybody, but I know when you're part of your campaign is about open bar events on a week by week basis.
But how do you talk about family values?
Yeah.
And then open up a bar.
Yeah.
At the end of this thing. So.
All right, I want to again. I probably took more time than I wanted to from you guys, but if you, let's go through each one of you, and you just give me a platform item that you feel strongly about. Susie, go ahead.
Okay, I got several of them. But exercising our sovereignty is a big thing out there in the community. They are hoping our party will get out there and exercise our sovereignty and do what's right for the people and fight the taxes. They would rather see us spending money fighting the taxes and go down fighting. If
Well,
we
one of the things
lose,
that
they're gonna go
on
down
that note, I
fighting.
remember Barry Snyder once saying at a meeting that if the people go down to the thruway the next time, he'll be standing with them.
Mhm.
You know, and at the end of the day, I think that's what you, as counselors, I'm wondering, you know, are you prepared to stand with your people? Not just tell them what to do, but are you willing to stand with them when they've had enough? When it is time to go spill out onto the thruway, are you going to be there with them?
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes, we did it before, I'll do it again.
Cheryl, go ahead. Talk about some of the things that you feel strongly about.
Well, I'm an advocate for education. Everybody in this room knows that. I wanted to say one thing. You can, you know, Rob Porter has his Harvard degree or whatever degrees he has, but it doesn't take just that. It takes common sense and a love for people to be a leader. And he lacks those two, common sense and the love for people. And there are great people on this ticket who I'm promoting and standing behind 100%, that are gonna go ahead and take care of our people. Because they love our people and they know, like Ross said, they're in the community, we're working together. We know the problems ins and outs. Our education's a big issue. There's not enough going toward our education. There's people that wanna go on to graduate school. There's no help for them. There's kids that wanna go to Division I and play school. There's no advocates for them, for their sports or academics. No one's telling them how to do it. No one's leading them by the hand. So the education program needs, you know, to be bumped up. Our ECLCs are one of our lowest rates coming out of, for kindergarten. 98% are not kindergarten ready. That's not the kid's fault. That's the teacher's fault. We need to go ahead and make sure that our kids are taken care of right from kindergarten all the way up from preschool. So there's a lot of things that I'm advocating for education. There's the elders. I want to get into the elders. I'd like to see a nursing home. I've had a few complaints. We've been knocking on doors lately. And some of the elders have been, you know, even the kids who've been taking care of their mothers or fathers have said, you know, my mom's really ill or my father's really ill and wants to come back to the territory and pass. You know, they don't want to live in a nursing home in Williamsville or Buffalo. They want to come home to die.
But even to assist families who are taking on responsibility for
There's
extended
no help
care.
for them.
Yeah,
There's
I
no help
understand
for
that.
them.
I understand that.
And, well, this administration, you know, when we're elected in, these things are gonna change. You know, it has to change. It has to. It's not if, it's going to change.
Sue, any final thoughts?
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts, but one of the things is that this new administration that's coming into office, no matter who gets in, will be dealing with the renegotiations of the gaming compact. I think we need intelligent people on there who will look out for the best interests of Seneca Nation, our tribal sovereignty, our issues of revenue sharing and so forth need to be renegotiated in the best interests of the Seneca Nation itself. And I think that we need to redraft a compact that has provisions in it that protect the rights of the Seneca people. In addition to that, I think that we need to expand our land base. I have been an advocate. The nation will live long beyond me and everybody else who's living today. Every man, woman, and child. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be advocating for expansion of that land base and buying up properties to create a larger homeland so that we're not living in crowded conditions like we are right now.
Well, one of the challenges to that, though, is, and I'm wondering, are you guys prepared to address this? Is one of the things that I condemned most about the Seneca Nation Compact was the land issues. For some reason, in somebody's infinite wisdom, they attached in the gaming compact a provision that would have restricted the land acquisition of the Seneca Nation. An act of Congress was passed on the Salamanca Lease Settlement Act that gave you guys a streamlined process for expanding your land base, and somebody decided to throw that into the gaming compact. And I don't know if you guys are prepared to address that issue in the coming administration.
Well, of course we are. And as a matter of fact, that was under Cy Schindler's administration that compact was negotiated, and he wants to run for president. Actually, it was the worst deal in the history of Indian gaming across the United States. And now he's vying for the presidency once again. I don't think so. If anyone's really listening out there, you better listen twice to this, because this man did a really dirty deed to this nation by that compact that he did. And those terms and conditions for the Salamanca Settlement Act that he threw away, I think there should be a legal challenge to that, to restore.
Well, I don't know how a
that
gaming
congressional
compact
act.
can undermine
No.
an act of Congress.
I want to add
Exactly,
on there, 8%
exactly.
is tax, New York State tax, right? Am I correct?
Or something like
Well,
that.
in the compact, we have to pay 25% of gaming revenue to the state. So
Well-
or-
On
so
gross
you-
revenue.
Well, what's the difference? What kind of
Well, that's going to be discussion that's going to have to continue, because one of the things is your exclusivity was actually breached, and at the end of the day, it came down to one issue. What was the state giving in exchange for that 25%? And I've said it here on this show, and I've said it on television. I've said it every place I'll let anybody listen. The Seneca Nation has gotten nothing, and they wanted to make it a one-way street.
Last thing, vote Seneca Party, row B. We need.
When is that, Sue?
That is November 6th.
Tuesday, Tuesday. All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining me, and I hope you don't become strangers when you get all rich and famous as counselors. And I hope you come back and visit with me and sit around and have some of these conversations
Thank
again.
you very much, John. We
All right.
appreciate your time.
Again, join me next week on Let's Talk Native. This is John Kane signing off. We'll see you.